Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the TDS Valiant, his hands gripping the metal railing as he stared at the massive display screen before him. The view showed empty space, but he knew that would change soon. Very soon. The red dots on his tactical display told the real story. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all heading straight for Earth. "Sir, we're getting reports from the outer sensors," said Lieutenant Kelly Freeman, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. "The Vex fleet is bigger than we thought. Much bigger." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. In his 43 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The Vex Empire had swept through 17 star systems in just 3 months. Every world they touched became a dead rock floating in space. No survivors, no mercy, no hope. "How long until they reach the outer defense line?" he asked. 18 hours, sir. Maybe less if they increase speed." 18 hours. Jake thought about his daughter Sarah back on Earth. She was only 16, probably sitting in her high school classroom right now, worrying about her math test instead of the alien fleet coming to destroy everything she had ever known. He wondered if he would ever see her again. "Captain Parker is requesting permission to begin the Mars evacuation," Freeman continued. "She says the transport ships are ready." Jake nodded. Captain Lisa Parker commanded the escort fleet protecting the Mars colonies. She was one of the best officers he had ever worked with, but even she couldn't work miracles. They had maybe 50 ships total. The Vex had brought over 2,000. "Tell her to proceed, get as many civilians out as possible." On the observation deck below, Dr. Amanda Cole hunched over her computer terminal, surrounded by twisted pieces of alien metal and strange glowing crystals. She had been studying Vex technology for weeks, ever since they recovered debris from the Battle of Titan. What she had learned kept her awake at night. "The energy signatures don't make sense," she muttered to herself, adjusting her glasses as she stared at the readings on her screen. "Their shields adapt to every weapon we throw at them. It's like they can predict what we're going to do before we do it." Her assistant, a young technician named Bobby Chen, looked up from his own workstation. "Maybe they've been watching us for a long time, learning our tactics." Amanda shook her head. "It's more than that. Look at these patterns." She pointed to a series of waveforms on her display. "Their ships don't just defend against our attacks. They counter them perfectly, every single time. It's like they're reading our minds." The laboratory shook slightly as the space station's engines fired, adjusting their orbit around Earth. Through the large window, Amanda could see the blue and white planet below. Soon it might look like all the other worlds the Vex had visited. Empty, silent, dead. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter led his small squadron of reconnaissance ships through the rocky debris field. His mission was simple in theory, but deadly in practice. Get close enough to the advancing Vex fleet to gather intelligence. Try not to get killed doing it. Stay low and quiet, he whispered into his communication device, even though he knew sound didn't travel in space. Old habits from atmospheric flight training. "We just need pictures and sensor readings, in and out." His wingman, Lieutenant Danny Ross, flew beside him in a modified fighter barely big enough for one person. "You really think this will make a difference, Commander?" "I mean, we already know they're coming. We already know we can't stop them." Steve didn't answer right away. He had been asking himself the same question for days. Every military analyst in the fleet had run the numbers. Every computer simulation came back with the same result: total defeat, complete annihilation. The Vex had technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had ever built. "Maybe not," he finally said. "But we have to try. That's what humans do. We try." Through his cockpit window, he could see the first signs of the enemy fleet in the distance. Tiny points of light that looked almost beautiful against the star field. He knew that each point represented a ship the size of a city, armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. Back on the command ship, Colonel Ryan Hayes sat in the strategy room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions and tactical projections. He had been a military planner for 20 years, but he had never faced a situation like this. Every scenario he ran ended the same way: Every strategy he developed fell apart under analysis. "The mathematics are clear," he said to the other officers gathered around the table. "We cannot win a direct engagement. Their shields are impenetrable, their weapons are superior, their numbers are overwhelming." Admiral Morrison entered the room, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "What are our options, Colonel?" Hayes gestured to the holographic display. "We can try to delay them. Hit-and-run attacks might slow their advance. We could evacuate more civilians." He paused, looking uncomfortable. "Or we could surrender and hope they show mercy." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the Vex didn't show mercy. They had never taken prisoners. They had never negotiated. They simply conquered and destroyed. "How long can we delay them?" Morrison asked. "Maybe a few days, a week at most." "But Admiral, I have to be honest with you. We're not just outnumbered. We're outclassed in every way that matters. This isn't a fair fight. This is an execution." On Mars, Captain Lisa Parker stood in the command center of the evacuation fleet, watching as transport ships loaded with refugees lifted off from the red planet's surface, families carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs, children crying for toys they had to leave behind, elderly people who had spent their entire lives building homes on Mars, now forced to abandon everything. "How many more trips can we make?" she asked her operations officer. "Maybe 3, Captain. 4 if we're lucky. But the Vex scouts are already in the outer system. If we wait too long, we won't make it out at all." Lisa watched another transport disappear into the dark sky. She thought about the people still on the surface, the ones they wouldn't be able to save, the ones who would die because there simply wasn't enough time or space to evacuate everyone. "Keep loading," she said. "Every person we save matters." Her communication device crackled with an incoming message from Admiral Morrison. "All fleet commanders prepare for final defensive positions. The enemy will be here soon." Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had joined the military to protect people, to make a difference. She had never imagined it would end like this. Dr. Cole looked up from her computer as the lights in the laboratory flickered. The space station's power systems were being redirected to weapons and shields. Everyone knew what that meant. The battle was about to begin. "Doctor," Bobby said quietly, "do you really think we have any chance at all?" Amanda stared at the alien artifacts on her desk, pieces of technology so advanced that she could barely understand how they worked. The Vex had conquered dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. They had never been defeated, never even been seriously challenged. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I know one thing about humans. We're stubborn. We don't give up even when we should. Maybe that's enough. Maybe being too stupid to quit is exactly what we need right now." Outside the laboratory window, the first human ships were moving into position, tiny specks of metal and determination, preparing to face an enemy that had never known defeat. The odds were impossible. The outcome was certain, but they were going to fight anyway. Because that's what humans do. The Vex fleet entered the outer solar system like a dark storm cloud blotting out the stars. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the enemy ships on his display screen, counting the massive vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Each one was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could turn planets into dust. "Sir, all fleet commanders are requesting orders," Lieutenant Kelly Freeman said from her station. "They want to know our battle formation." Morrison stared at the tactical display for a long moment. Every military manual he had ever read said the same thing. Form up in defensive lines, concentrate firepower, present a unified front against the enemy. But those manuals had been written for fighting other humans, not an alien empire that had never lost a single battle. "Tell all ships to scatter," he said quietly. Freeman blinked. "Sir, you heard me. Break formation. Every ship for itself. No coordinated attacks. No battle lines. I want complete chaos out there." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. This went against everything they had been trained to do. But Morrison had made his decision. If they fought the Vex the way the aliens expected, they would die in minutes. Maybe if they did something completely unexpected, they could survive a little longer. Captain Lisa Parker received the scatter order just as her destroyer squadron was moving into formation near Jupiter. Her tactical officer looked at her with confusion in his eyes. "Captain, this doesn't make sense. We should be concentrating our forces, not spreading them out." Lisa thought about it for a moment. She had served under Morrison for 5 years. He was not a reckless man. If he was ordering them to break every rule in the book, he must have a reason. "Do it," she said. "All ships, break formation. We're going hunting." Instead of waiting for the Vex to come to them, Lisa led her ships in a wide arc around the enemy fleet. She targeted the smaller vessels at the rear of the formation, supply ships, support craft, the unglamorous but essential vessels that kept the main battle fleet operational. Her first attack came without warning. 3 human destroyers dropped out of hyperspace directly behind a Vex supply convoy. The alien ships, focused on their massive battleships ahead, were caught completely off guard. Lisa's ships fired everything they had and disappeared back into hyperspace before the enemy could respond. The attack barely scratched the Vex fleet, but something strange happened. For the first time in recorded history, Vex ships broke their perfect formation. Several battleships turned around to hunt for the attackers, disrupting their careful advance. On the research station, Dr. Amanda Cole was working frantically with the alien prisoners they had captured during previous skirmishes. The Vex soldiers were strange creatures, tall and thin with large heads and pale skin. But the strangest thing about them was how they acted. They moved in perfect coordination, as if they shared a single mind. "They're not really individuals," she explained to her assistant Bobby Chen. "They're more like parts of a larger organism. That's why they're so efficient. They don't waste time with discussion or disagreement, they just act." Bobby watched one of the prisoners through the observation window. The alien sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. It had been in the same position for hours. "So how do we fight something like that?" he asked. Amanda pulled up her brain scan data on the computer screen. "Look at this. Their neural patterns are incredibly organized. Everything follows precise mathematical sequences. They can predict our tactics because they think we're as logical as they are." She highlighted a section of the brain scan. "But what if we're not logical? What if we do things that make no sense at all?" Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter was leading his reconnaissance squadron on the strangest mission of his military career. Instead of gathering intelligence, they were attacking the Vex fleet with mining equipment. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them," he told his pilots over the radio. "We're trying to confuse them." His ships had been modified with civilian mining lasers, asteroid processing equipment, and construction tools. Nothing the Vex had ever seen in combat before. They flew in patterns that violated every principle of space warfare, weaving through the enemy formation like they were playing some kind of game. Lieutenant Tony Blake volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. He piloted a modified fighter loaded with industrial explosives toward the center of the enemy fleet. Not military explosives that the Vex would recognize, but mining charges designed to break apart asteroids. "This is insane," his wingman Danny Ross said over the radio. "Those mining charges won't even dent their shields." "That's not the point," Tony replied, dodging plasma fire from enemy fighters. "We're not trying to hurt them. We're trying to make them think." He released his payload directly into the middle of a Vex battle formation. The mining explosives detonated in a series of bright flashes that did no real damage to the alien ships. But something unprecedented happened. The Vex formation wavered. For just a moment, their perfect coordination faltered. Dr. Cole was monitoring the battle from her laboratory when she noticed something remarkable in the alien neural scans. The prisoners' brain patterns were fluctuating. The perfect mathematical sequences were developing small irregularities. "They're trying to understand what we're doing," she said excitedly. "But our tactics don't fit any of their models. They're actually having to think about it." Colonel Ryan Hayes was watching the battle from the command center, trying to make sense of what was happening. By all military logic, the scattered human attacks should have been easily defeated. The Vex ships were superior in every way, but somehow the alien fleet was slowing down. "Their response time is increasing," he reported to Admiral Morrison. "It's taking them longer to react to our attacks." Morrison nodded grimly. "They're used to fighting enemies who follow logical patterns. were doing things that make no sense from their perspective. Captain Lisa Parker's ship struck again, this time using a completely different approach. Instead of attacking military targets, they focused on the Vex communication arrays, not to destroy them but to flood them with garbage data, human music, television shows, and random radio chatter from Earth. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Several Vex ships actually stopped moving, as if their crews were paralyzed by the flood of incomprehensible information. On her bridge, Lisa watched the enemy fleet's reaction with amazement. "They can't process it," she said to her tactical officer. "All that human chaos is overloading their systems." Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter saw an opportunity and took it. His squadron, still equipped with mining equipment, flew directly into the confused Vex formation. They used construction tools to physically grab onto enemy ships, not to damage them but to disrupt their movement patterns. "What are they doing?" Danny Ross asked as he watched human ships literally wrestling with alien vessels. "They're trying to figure us out," Steve replied. "But how do you analyze something completely random?" The battle continued for hours, with human ships darting in and out of the Vex formation like annoying insects. They used garbage scows as ramming ships, fired flare guns at enemy sensors, and even broadcast cooking shows at full volume toward the alien fleet. Nothing they did should have worked. But slowly, incredibly, the Vex advance began to slow and then stop completely. Dr. Cole was studying the latest neural scans when she made a shocking discovery. The alien prisoners were showing signs of individual thought patterns. The perfect coordination was breaking down as their minds struggled to process human unpredictability. "Admiral," she called Morrison on the communication system, "I think we're actually hurting them. Not physically, but mentally. Their collective consciousness can't handle true randomness." Morrison looked at the tactical display. For the first time since the war began, human ships had forced Vex vessels to retreat. Not through superior firepower, but through sheer incomprehensible chaos. "All ships," he broadcast to the fleet, "continue random attacks. Do whatever makes the least sense. Be as human as possible." Captain Lisa Parker smiled as she received the order. Be as human as possible. Finally, military orders that made perfect sense to her. The first day of the battle for Earth ended with something no one had thought possible. The Vex fleet, for the first time in their history, had been forced to stop and reconsider their strategy. They had met an enemy that refused to fight by any rules they understood, and somehow, impossibly, the humans were still alive. Dr. Amanda Cole stared at the Vex prisoner through the thick glass window of the holding cell. The alien had been sitting in the same position for 3 days, barely moving except to accept food. But something was different now. Its large, pale eyes seemed more focused, more aware. "Try talking to it again," she told Lieutenant Kelly Freeman, who had volunteered to help with the communication experiments. Kelly activated the translation device they had built from captured Vex technology. "Can you understand me?" she asked. Slowly. The alien's head turned slightly. For the first time since its capture, it looked directly at a human. When it spoke, its voice was soft and confused. "Why do you sing when you fight?" it asked. Amanda and Kelly exchanged surprised glances. During yesterday's battle, Captain Lisa Parker's squadron had been broadcasting old Earth songs while they attacked. It was just another random tactic, but apparently the aliens had been listening. "Because it makes us feel better," Kelly answered honestly. "Music helps us stay brave." The Vex prisoner tilted its head, clearly struggling to understand. "Feeling better serves no tactical purpose. Bravery is inefficient. Fear keeps units alive longer." Dr. Cole leaned forward. This was the first real conversation they had managed, with any Vex prisoner. "But we're not just tactical units," she said. "We're individuals. We fight for things that matter to us personally." "Individuals?" The alien's voice carried something that might have been confusion or even sadness. I know. The collective knows what is best. Individual thought leads to chaos and suffering." Kelly looked at Amanda with wide eyes. The alien had said "I remember" before correcting itself to "the collective knows." There was something buried inside this creature's mind, something the collective consciousness was trying to suppress. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the TDS Valiant, Admiral Jake Morrison was meeting with his senior officers to plan their next move. The random attacks had worked better than anyone expected, but the Vex fleet was adapting. They needed something new. Their ships are starting to ignore our random attacks, Colonel Ryan Hayes reported. They're learning to filter out what they consider meaningless noise. Morrison nodded. Then we need to make the noise more meaningful. Or more meaningless. I'm not sure which. Captain Lisa Parker joined the meeting via video link from her ship. Her destroyer squadron was currently hiding in the asteroid belt, preparing for another raid. Admiral, I have an idea, she said. What if we stop trying to hurt them and start trying to talk to them, but not the way they expect? What do you mean? Morrison asked. My communications officer has been monitoring their transmissions. They use pure data streams. Mathematical concepts, no emotion, no personal context. What if we flooded their channels with human stories, personal messages, things that make no tactical sense at all? Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter, who was also listening to the meeting, spoke up from his fighter cockpit. My grandmother always said the best way to confuse someone is to be completely honest with them when they expect you to lie. Morrison thought about it. They had tried random attacks, chaotic tactics, and unpredictable weapons. Maybe it was time to try random honesty. Do it, he said. All ships open channels to the Vex fleet. Tell them whatever you want. Talk about your families, your hobbies, your fears. Make it personal. Within hours, human ships throughout the solar system were broadcasting toward the enemy fleet. Pilots talked about their children. Engineers described their favorite recipes. Soldiers shared memories of home. The communications were completely unorganized, totally random, and absolutely human. The effect on the Vex fleet was immediate and dramatic. Ships began slowing down even more. Some started drifting off course. A few actually stopped responding to commands from their fleet commanders. Dr. Cole was monitoring the alien prisoners when the broadcasts began. All of them started showing signs of distress. Their perfectly coordinated movements became jerky and uncertain. One of them actually began to cry. What's happening to them? Bobby Chen asked, watching the aliens through the observation windows. Amanda checked her neural monitoring equipment. The brain scans were showing something incredible. The mathematical patterns that controlled Vex consciousness were breaking down. Individual thought patterns were emerging from the collective structure. The personal stories are triggering something, she said excitedly. Something buried deep in their minds. I think they used to be individuals, just like us. She opened the communication channel to the first prisoner. What's your name? She asked. The alien looked up, tears streaming down its pale face. For a moment, it seemed unable to speak. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, it said, I think it was Zek. My name was Zek. Kelly Freeman gasped. You remember your name? The stories. They remind me of things I had forgotten. I had a family once, a mate, children. But the collective said individual attachments were weakness. They made us forget. The alien's voice grew stronger. But I remember now. I remember who I was before. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued their strange psychological warfare. Captain Parker's crew was broadcasting a cooking show explaining how to make pizza while simultaneously launching attacks on Vex supply lines. The combination of domestic normalcy and military action seemed to completely confuse the enemy. Lieutenant Tony Blake was sharing stories about his dog while flying his fighter through the middle of a Vex battle formation. The alien ships were so busy trying to analyze his transmission that they forgot to shoot at him. His name is Buddy, Tony said over the radio while dodging plasma fire. He's a golden retriever and he thinks every person he meets is his best friend. Even the mailman, who he barks at every single day but still wags his tail when he sees him. On the Vex command ship, the fleet commanders were experiencing something they had never felt before. Confusion. The human transmissions made no tactical sense, served no military purpose, and seemed to have no logical structure, but they couldn't stop listening. One transmission particularly bothered them. A young human pilot was talking about his fear of dying, not in battle, but of dying without telling his father that he loved him. The concept of love was something the collective had long ago decided was inefficient and dangerous. But as the commanders listened to story after story of human emotion, something began to stir in their own minds. Memories they had thought were completely erased, feelings they had been taught to suppress. Back on the research station, Dr. Cole was working with 6 Vex prisoners who had all begun to remember their individual identities. They called themselves the Awakened, and they were eager to help humanity understand their former masters. The collective is not evil, explained Zek, the first alien to remember his name. They genuinely believe they are saving us from the pain of individual existence. But they are wrong. The pain is worth it because it comes with joy, love, and hope. Another awakened Vex, who remembered being called Nell, spoke up. The fleet commanders are struggling right now. Your stories are awakening memories they thought were gone forever. Some of them are remembering what it was like to have families, to make personal choices. Amanda realized they had stumbled onto something much bigger than a military tactic.
This isn't just about winning the war, she said. This is about freeing an entire species from forced unity.
Colonel Hayes was monitoring the battle situation when something unprecedented happened. One of the Vex cruisers broke away from the main fleet and began broadcasting on human frequencies. Human vessels, came a transmission in heavily accented, but understandable English. This is Commander. I remember now. Commander Yex of the awakened vessel Harmony. We request permission to join your cause. We no longer wish to serve the collective. The bridge of the Valiant fell silent. In all the years of war between humans and the Vex Empire, no alien ship had ever defected. It was supposed to be impossible. Admiral Morrison looked at his officers, then activated the communication system. Commander Yex, this is Admiral Morrison of the human fleet. Permission granted. Welcome to the fight for individual freedom. As news of the defection spread through both fleets, more Vex ships began showing signs of internal conflict. The perfect unity of the Empire was cracking, and through those cracks the light of individual consciousness was beginning to shine. The war was no longer about human survival. It had become about the liberation of minds that had been enslaved for centuries, and it was just the beginning. News of Commander Yex's defection spread through the Vex fleet like wildfire. Within hours, 3 more cruisers had broken away from the main formation and declared themselves awakened. The perfect order of the alien armada was falling apart, as individual consciousness began to emerge across their ranks. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the TDS Valiant, watching the tactical display with amazement. Red dots representing enemy ships were turning blue one by one, as more Vex vessels joined the growing rebellion against their collective masters. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from awakened ships throughout their fleet, Lieutenant Kelly Freeman reported. They want to coordinate attacks against the remaining collective forces. Morrison shook his head in wonder. 3 days ago, they had been facing certain death. Now they found themselves leading a revolution that spanned the entire enemy fleet. Captain Lisa Parker was already working with the first defectors, establishing joint patrol routes around Jupiter's moons. Her destroyer squadron flew alongside Vex cruisers that had been trying to kill them just hours before. This feels strange, her tactical officer admitted as they flew in formation with alien ships. Yesterday they were shooting at us, today we're sharing battle plans. Lisa understood the feeling. Commander Yex's vessel, the Harmony, was twice the size of her destroyer and armed with weapons that could vaporize her ship in seconds. But the alien commander had proven his sincerity by sharing detailed intelligence about collective fleet positions and weaknesses. Strange times call for strange alliances, she replied. Besides, they're not really our enemies anymore. They're victims who are finally breaking free. Dr. Amanda Cole was working around the clock in her laboratory, now expanded to accommodate dozens of awakening Vex prisoners. Each one who remembered their individual identity brought new insights into how the collective system worked and how to break others free from its control. Zek, the first alien to remember his name, had become her primary assistant, His knowledge of Vex psychology was invaluable in developing new techniques to awaken sleeping minds. The collective uses fear to maintain control, he explained to Cole and her team. They make us believe that individual thought leads only to suffering and chaos, but your species proves them wrong every day. Bobby Chen was working with Nell, another awakened Vex, to modify their broadcast equipment. They had discovered that certain combinations of human music and personal stories were particularly effective at triggering suppressed memories. Classical music works well, Nell said, his pale fingers dancing over the alien control panels. The mathematical patterns appeal to our logical minds, but the emotional content awakens something deeper. Jazz is even more effective because it contains controlled chaos. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter was leading the most unusual squadron in human military history. His pilots flew alongside awakened Vex fighters, teaching them human combat tactics while learning alien techniques in return. The key is improvisation, he explained to a group of newly awakened pilots during a briefing. Don't think too much about what you're going to do next. Trust your instincts. Make decisions based on feeling rather than pure logic. One of the alien pilots, who now called himself Kren, raised a thin hand. But feelings are unreliable. They change without logical reason, Steve smiled. That's exactly the point. If you can't predict your own actions, how can the enemy predict them? Feelings make us unpredictable, and unpredictability is our greatest weapon. The awakened Vex were eager students. They had spent so long following orders without question that the concept of making personal choices was both thrilling and terrifying. But they were learning fast. Captain Sue Miller, who commanded a small task force of human and awakened ships, was discovering that their alien allies brought unexpected advantages to the fight. Vex technology was indeed superior to human equipment, but when combined with human creativity and unpredictability, it became devastatingly effective. Their shields can adapt to any energy weapon, she explained to Admiral Morrison during a tactical briefing, but when we use them in completely random patterns targeting things that make no tactical sense, the collective forces can't figure out how to respond. The joint human-alien forces had developed new battle tactics that would have been impossible for either species alone. Human creativity guided alien technology in attacks that defied all military logic. They would attack supply depots while ignoring strategic targets, or spend hours firing at empty space just to confuse enemy sensors. Colonel Ryan Hayes was documenting these new strategies when he realized something profound. We're not just winning battles, he told Morrison. We're teaching an entire species how to be free. Every awakened ship becomes a teacher for others, still trapped in the collective. The revolution was spreading beyond the immediate battle zone. Awakened Vex ships were broadcasting human stories and music to their home worlds, carrying the message of individual freedom to billions of aliens who had never imagined such a thing was possible. Lieutenant Tony Blake found himself working with a Vex pilot named Vec, teaching him how to fly with intuition rather than pure calculation. They were practicing aerial maneuvers above Earth's moon when Vec made a discovery that changed everything. I can feel the collective trying to reassert control, Vec said over the radio. It's like a voice in my head telling me to return to the formation. But I can resist it now. Your stories have made me stronger. This was crucial intelligence. The collective wasn't giving up easily. They were actively trying to reclaim awakened minds, using some kind of long-range mental influence. But the awakened aliens were developing resistance, building mental shields out of human emotions and memories. Dr. Cole was fascinated by this development. They're creating individual identity from human experiences, she explained to Admiral Morrison. Every story we tell them, every emotion we share becomes part of their defense against collective control. The human fleet began broadcasting with renewed intensity. Pilots shared childhood memories while flying combat missions. Engineers told stories about their families while repairing battle damage. Even Admiral Morrison began broadcasting, talking about his daughter Sarah and his hopes for her future. The effect was remarkable. More Vex ships were awakening every hour, and those who had already broken free were becoming stronger and more independent. The collective forces found themselves fighting not just humans but their own former allies, who now possessed a combination of alien technology and human determination. Commander Yex had become the unofficial leader of the awakened Vex forces. His ship, the Harmony, served as a coordination center for the growing rebellion. He worked closely with Captain Parker to plan joint operations against remaining collective strongholds. "My people have been slaves to the collective for over 1,000 years," he told her during one of their planning sessions. "We had forgotten what it meant to make our own choices, to feel joy or sorrow or love. Your species has given us back our souls." Lisa was moved by his words, but she also recognized the enormous responsibility they now carried. "This isn't just about defeating the collective anymore," she said. "We're helping to rebuild an entire civilization." The awakened Vex were eager to share their own stories and experiences, adding their voices to the growing broadcast network that was spreading freedom throughout the galaxy. They talked about their lives before the collective, their memories of family and friends, their dreams for the future. But the collective leadership wasn't surrendering quietly. As more ships awakened and joined the rebellion, the remaining loyal forces became increasingly desperate. They began destroying their own vessels rather than allowing them to defect, turning the war into a race between liberation and annihilation. Pilot. Officer Greg Watson was flying a modified fighter equipped with memory bombs, devices that broadcast concentrated human experiences directly into Vex neural networks. Each successful mission resulted in more defections and increasing chaos in the enemy ranks. "It's working," he reported to his squadron leader. "But the collective forces are getting more aggressive. They're firing on their own ships now, trying to prevent them from hearing our broadcasts." The battle for the solar system had become something unprecedented in galactic history. It was no longer a war between species, but a struggle between two fundamentally different ways of thinking. Individual freedom versus collective unity. Chaotic creativity versus ordered efficiency. The messy, unpredictable beauty of personal choice versus the cold perfection of unified purpose. And somehow, impossibly, freedom was winning. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't fought with weapons or ships, but with thoughts and memories and the fundamental question of what it meant to be alive. Dr. Amanda Cole stood in her laboratory, surrounded by awakened Vex scientists who had once been her enemies. Together they had built something that had never existed before, a device that could connect human and alien minds directly to the collective's central network. "Are you sure about this?" asked Zek, his pale face showing concern. "The collective leadership won't just debate with you. They'll try to absorb your consciousness into their system." Amanda checked the neural interface one more time. The device looked simple enough, a headset covered in blinking lights and thin wires, but it represented months of combined human and Vex research, the key to ending the war without destroying either species. "Someone has to talk to them," she said, "and I'm the one who understands their psychology best." Admiral Jake Morrison stood beside her, his weathered face grim with worry. "Dr. Cole, I can't order you to do this. It's too dangerous. We don't even know if you'll be able to get back out." Amanda smiled at him. "Admiral, 3 months ago we thought we were all going to die. Now we're trying to save an entire species from mental slavery. I'd say that's worth the risk." Outside the laboratory, the combined human and awakened Vex fleet was moving toward the collective's command nexus, a massive structure at the heart of their formation that housed the original collective leadership. Captain Lisa Parker commanded the escort ships, while Commander Yex led the awakened forces. "All ships maintain formation," Lisa broadcast to the fleet. "Remember, we're not here to destroy them. We're here to free them." Lieutenant Commander Steve Carter flew his fighter alongside alien craft, marveling at how natural it felt to work with beings who had been mortal enemies just weeks before. His wingman was Kren, the awakened Vex pilot who had learned to trust his feelings instead of pure logic. "Human, Steve," Kren said over the radio, using the formal address he preferred. "The collective ships are not firing at us. They appear to be, confused." Steve looked at his tactical display. The enemy vessels were moving in strange patterns, some advancing while others retreated. The perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous was completely gone. "They're fighting themselves," he realized. Part of them wants to destroy us, but another part is listening to our broadcasts and beginning to question their orders. Meanwhile, Dr. Cole was preparing to enter the collective network. She put on the neural interface while Bobby Chen and Nell monitored her vital signs. Around her, awakened Vex maintained a protective mental shield, ready to pull her back if the collective tried to trap her consciousness. "Remember," Zek said, "don't try to fight them with logic. They're better at that than any individual mind. Fight them with stories, with emotions, with all the messy, illogical things that make humans who you are." Amanda nodded and activated the device. The world around her disappeared, replaced by a vast digital landscape of mathematical equations and data streams. She was inside the collective, consciousness surrounded by the combined thoughts of billions of minds. The collective leadership materialized before her as geometric shapes of pure thought. They communicated without words, sending concepts directly into her mind. "Human entity, you have infected our unity with chaos. Your species has corrupted our perfect order with emotional irrationality. You must be absorbed or eliminated." Amanda felt the collective trying to overwhelm her individual consciousness, pressing against her mind with the weight of countless unified thoughts. But she held on to her memories, her childhood, her friends, her love of discovery, all the small and silly things that made her human. "You're afraid," she said, and the accusation rippled through the collective like a shockwave. "You're terrified of being individuals again because you've forgotten how to make your own choices." The geometric shapes flickered with what might have been anger. "Fear is inefficient. Choice leads to suffering. We eliminated these weaknesses millennia ago when we achieved perfect unity." "But you didn't eliminate them," Amanda replied. "You just hid them." Every awakened Vex remembers what they lost. They remember having families, making mistakes, feeling joy and sadness. You took that away from them. Images began appearing in the digital space around her, memories that the collective leadership had tried to suppress. She saw the Vex as they had been before the collective, individuals who loved and dreamed and made art. She saw the catastrophe that had driven them to seek unity, a war so devastating that they chose to give up their freedom rather than face such pain again. "We saved them from themselves," the collective insisted. "Individual consciousness leads only to conflict and destruction. We brought peace." "You brought emptiness," Amanda said. "Yes, individual choice can lead to pain, but it also leads to growth, creativity, love. The awakened Vex aren't asking you to suffer. They're asking you to live." In the physical world, the battle around the command nexus had become a standoff. Collective ships faced awakened vessels while human forces tried to keep peace between them. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display, knowing that everything depended on Dr. Cole's mission inside the network. "Sir, we're getting strange readings from the collective command ship," reported Lieutenant Kelly Freeman. "Their power systems are fluctuating." Inside the network, Amanda was showing the collective leadership memories from the awakened Vex. Zek remembering his family, Nell rediscovering music, Kren learning to trust his instincts. Each memory was like a crack in the perfect mathematical structure of the collective consciousness. "They're happy," she said. "They're making their own choices and they're happy. Yes, sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they feel sad or afraid. But they also feel wonder and joy and love. Isn't that worth preserving?" The collective shapes were becoming less geometric, more organic. For the first time in centuries, individual thoughts were emerging from the unified mass. "I remember," one voice said hesitantly. "I had a garden once. I grew flowers that served no practical purpose except beauty. I composed music," said another, "songs that had no mathematical perfection, but made others smile." More voices joined in, memories surfacing from the depths of suppressed consciousness. The collective leadership was remembering what they had given up in their quest for perfect unity. "But the chaos," they said, their unified voice now shaking with uncertainty. "The conflicts, the wars, the pain of individual existence." Amanda felt their fear and understood it completely. Yes, there will be conflicts, there will be pain, But there will also be people to help you through it. You don't have to choose between perfect unity and complete isolation. You can choose community. Individuals working together by choice, not compulsion. The digital landscape around her began to change. Mathematical equations transformed into art, data streams became music, and the cold perfection of collective thought gave way to the warm chaos of individual consciousness. In the physical world, the collective command ship sent out a signal that rippled through their entire fleet. One by one, the remaining ships powered down their weapons and began broadcasting messages of awakening. "This is the former collective leadership," came a transmission on all frequencies. "We choose to remember who we were. We choose to become individuals again. The war is over." Admiral Morrison felt tears in his eyes as he watched the tactical display. The red dots representing enemy ships were all turning blue now, as an entire species chose freedom over safety. Captain Lisa Parker was coordinating with awakened ships throughout the fleet when she received an unexpected message. It was from her daughter back on Earth who had been listening to the broadcasts. "Mom," the young girl said, "the alien ships are flying in patterns now. They look like they're dancing." And indeed they were. Across the solar system, awakened Vex vessels were experimenting with their newfound freedom, flying in formations that served no tactical purpose except beauty and joy. Dr. Cole emerged from the network interface, exhausted but triumphant. Around her, the awakened Vex were celebrating in their own quiet way, finally free to experience the full range of individual emotion. "It's done," she said simply. "They've chosen to be free." Years later, Admiral Morrison would serve as the first human ambassador to the Galactic Confederation, a loose alliance of species that had once been part of the Vex Empire. Each world was free to choose its own government, its own culture, its own way of life. Some chose collective consciousness, but now it was a choice made freely rather than forced upon them. Others embraced radical individualism. Most found something in between, communities of individuals who chose to work together while maintaining their personal freedom. Dr. Cole continued her research, now focused on helping different species understand each other despite their fundamental differences. Zek became her research partner, bringing an alien perspective to the study of consciousness and choice. Captain Parker commanded the first joint exploration fleet beyond the former Empire's borders, with crews representing dozens of species learning to work together despite their differences. They discovered new worlds, new cultures, and new ways of thinking about what it meant to be alive.